Hi guys, my name is Matti Sulanto, and in this video I'm gonna take a look at the Sigma 45mm F2.8 lens for the L mount. But before I continue with this lens, please consider subscribing to my channel and tap the bell down there so you'll get notified every time I post a new video. In my travel gear video last Friday, I did not mention this lens at all. And that's because literally at the last minute I decided to make some changes in my camera bag. And instead of taking the LX100 Mark II, I took this lens because I really wanted to try this lens more, and I thought that what would be a better chance to try a compact lens like this than a real trip, a real travel, because I think this lens is very well suited for traveling. If you watched my video last Friday, you already know that I'm not in Helsinki, I'm in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. But if you didn't watch, okay, now I told you. Hi. This is very interesting. I'm recording this video here on the street, and this is the second time somebody stops by and wants me to take their picture. And let me tell you, if that happens to you, wherever you are, take it. Take the picture, even if the lighting is not that great right there or the situation is not that great. Take the picture. It's going to be a great memory, or a very nice memory of the situation. And you never know, maybe you will get a really nice picture actually. So I'm in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, and I'm reviewing this Sigma 45mm F2.8 L mount lens. I'm sorry I couldn't pull off a video for this week's Tuesday. I was so beat up after traveling almost 24 hours from my home in Helsinki to this apartment I have here in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. But now this is my first video from this trip, and let's get to this lens right now. Oh yes, and one more thing before I get to this lens. I had my first ever meet and greet back there at Cafe Fika. It's behind me like 50 meters, and some people actually showed up, so thanks to everybody for showing up. It was a great pleasure to me, and I'm also honored that in this faraway place I had a few fans that showed up. And now to this lens. So this lens, this Sigma 45mm F2.8, this is Sigma's first full-frame mirrorless lens that's designed from scratch. And according to Sigma, this lens, hold on, is newly developed high-performance lens series for full-frame cameras. So that makes me think that we're going to get more of these, or more similar lenses, maybe different focal lengths at least, and maybe different maximum apertures and whatever. This lens is available for the L mount and for the Sony E mount. Let's first talk about the exterior design and the build quality of this lens. I mean, this lens looks like no other Sigma lens before. It doesn't look like any of the Art series lenses, and you could actually mistake this lens easily for a manual focus lens because of the way it looks. The build quality of this lens is really good. Every exterior part is made of metal. Even the lens hood and the aperture and the focus ring, which in many cases are made of plastic, even though the rest of the lens is metal. But in this lens, every part is made of metal. This lens is not fully weather sealed, but the lens mount has a seal, which is some help in bad conditions or hard conditions. All in all, the mechanical construction seems very solid. But there's one thing I really don't understand, and that's the aperture ring design. See, the direction of the aperture ring is the opposite compared to Panasonic Lumix lenses. On Panasonic lens, the small aperture number is on the left and the high aperture number is on the right. But on the Sigma, it's the other way around. And I really don't get this. This is the very first from scratch designed L mount lens. So why not design the lens ring similar as it is on Panasonic Lumix lenses. Now it seems like there's a design flaw or something. And I know the aperture ring design is not part of the L-mount alliance, but because Sigma is part of that alliance, I think they should have designed this so that it's sort of perfect for Lumix cameras. And the Leica lenses, they don't have aperture ring, and this is the first Sigma lens, and Sigma doesn't have like a long tradition of making the aperture ring turn a certain way, because this is the very first lens of its kind. So this is something I don't understand. It's otherwise very like fine and solid design. This lens is really small and light, especially for a full frame lens. This weighs in only at about 215 grams, and the filter thread is 55 millimeters. But despite of the small size, it feels really well balanced, even on the Lumix S1R camera body, which is not the smallest mirrorless camera body out there. And now I think it's a good time to check out a few pictures I shot on this lens. The optical construction of this lens is relatively simple for a modern lens. There are 8 lens elements in 7 groups, and the front element is relatively small compared to the rear element of the lens. And the design is a little bit similar to, for example, the Canon 35mm lens for their full-frame R mount. The aperture mechanism has 7 rounded blades to help to create those rounded bokeh balls in the background of the image. There's no optical or any kind of image stabilizer inside of this lens, and the only stabilizer you're gonna get is the in-body stabilizer, which is really good on Lumix cameras, and there should be no problem in getting about at least half a second exposure, sharp exposure handheld. At least I could do that, so I think anyone can do that if I can do that. The sharpness and contrast of this lens are really great. Of course, a lens like this with a modest maximum aperture of F2.8 is, relatively speaking, easy to design compared to a lens with a maximum aperture of, say, F1.4. But even so, I'm impressed. This lens is really sharp, corner to corner, even wide open. But of course, it gets better when stopped down, and typically for a full-frame lens, the sweet spot when it comes to sharpness and contrast is around F4, F8 range. And even if the lens has quite modest maximum aperture of F2.8, the bokeh is still quite pleasing and not too busy. This lens handles backlight also pretty well, but you will get some reflections in your shot if the sun is hitting the front element directly. But some of the reflections or flare you get is kind of nice looking, and you can probably take advantage of it and make your images look even better. If you want to avoid reflections or flare, I think it's wise always try not to get the sun or any bright light hit directly the front element. The distortions and chromatic aberrations and also partially the vignetting are corrected in camera, and some RAW developers like Lightroom also apply the correction profile automatically, so in most cases those are nothing to worry about. There is some vignetting visible wide open, but it disappears when you stop down just a little bit, and if you really want to get rid of the wide open vignetting in post, it's really easy to do in any RAW developer. The autofocus is really fast, accurate and silent. There's nothing much more to say about it. The manual focus ring has very nice, just about right resistance to it, and also the manual focusing is really nice. Of course it's fly-by-wire, but it's one of the best you can get of that type. And now let's check out a few more pictures that I shot on this lens, and after that I will conclude my review of this Sigma 45mm f2.8 lens for the L mount. I really like this lens, and my conclusion with this lens is that it's really nice lens and highly recommended. The price is at around 550 euros or US dollars, which makes this kind of like a budget lens, but it doesn't feel like a budget lens at all. The mechanical construction is really good, and the optical quality is really great as well, and it's even partially weather sealed. About a year and a half ago, I had a chance to visit Sigma factory in Aizu, Japan, and during that visit I also had a chance to interview Mr. Kazuto Yamaki and chat with him for a bit. And during that visit I asked or told Mr. Yamaki that I'd like them to design compact, affordable and optically good lenses for mirrorless, full-frame mirrorless cameras. And this is exactly the kind of lens that I was hoping for back then, about a year and a half ago. So I'd like to think this lens was designed for me. Of course, I understand there could have been some other reasons as well to design and manufacture this lens. But Mr. Yamaki, if you're watching this, I'd like to thank you for designing this lens for me. And you guys, thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.